There is a part of you that you have never met. It knows your deepest fears, your most shameful desires, and the person you swore you would never become. Carl Jung called it the shadow, and here is what terrifies most people. Your shadow has been controlling your life without you even knowing it. Every time you feel an irrational rage towards someone, every time you sabotage your own success, every time you judge someone with an intensity that surprises even you, that is not random, that is your shadow speaking. Jung spent decades mapping this hidden territory of the human psyche, and what he found shook the foundations of psychology. Shadow controls everything. Today, we are going to descend into the darkest corners of your own mind, and by the end, you will understand why Jung himself said that this was not just his most important discovery, but the most important work any human being can do. As he once warned, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. So let us begin. Birth of shadow. Before we can face the shadow, we need to understand where it comes from. Picture this: you are a child, maybe 4 or 5 years old. You throw a tantrum in public and your mother looks at you with that face. You know the one, that look of disappointment, of shame. In that moment, something happens inside you. The part of you that wanted to scream, to rage, to be wild and uncontrollable gets shoved into a box, locked away, hidden. Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is. This happens thousands of times throughout your childhood. Every trait your parents disapproved of, every behavior your teachers punished, every part of yourself that society told you was unacceptable. Buried. But here is the thing Jung discovered that changed everything. Those parts do not disappear. They do not die. They go underground. They form what Jung called the shadow, a living, breathing part of your psyche that operates entirely outside your awareness. Hidden alive, waiting. And the longer you ignore it, the more powerful it becomes. But what exactly does this shadow look like in your daily life? Shadow in action. Have you ever met someone and instantly disliked them for no reason, not because they did anything wrong, just something about them made your skin crawl? Congratulations, you just met your shadow. Jung called this projection. The things you despise most in others are often the very things you have buried in yourself. Everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Think about it: the person at work who is always showing off, the friend who is too aggressive, the stranger online whose arrogance makes your blood boil. What if their behavior triggers you because somewhere deep inside you have that same trait, locked in a cage, screaming to be acknowledged? Your hatred is a mirror you refuse to look into. This is not comfortable to hear. Nobody wants to believe that the things they judge others for exist within themselves, but Jung was relentless on this point. He said the shadow is not just your weakness. It contains your unlived life, your suppressed creativity, your buried ambition, your forbidden desires. If this is making you rethink how you see people around you, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of human wisdom with me. Because what comes next will shake you to your core. The shadow does not just affect how you see others. It destroys your relationships from the inside out. Poison in love. Jung discovered something that most relationship experts still do not understand. The shadow is the hidden saboteur of every intimate relationship you will ever have. Here is how it works. You fall in love with someone, everything feels perfect. They are kind, gentle, everything you ever wanted. Then 6 months later you start fighting. You say cruel things you do not mean. You push them away for reasons you cannot explain. We do not fall in love with people. We fall in love with what our shadow needs to see. Jung called this the anima and animus projection. You unconsciously choose partners who carry the traits your shadow has suppressed. The quiet person falls for the loud one. The controlled person falls for the wild one. The rational person falls for the emotional one. Attraction is shadow calling. And when those traits inevitably clash with your conscious personality, the relationship becomes a battlefield. Not because the other person is wrong, but because your shadow is using them as a mirror to show you what you refuse to see in yourself. The meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But relationships are only the beginning. The shadow has an even darker trick up its sleeve. Collective shadow. In 1933, Jung watched an entire nation surrender its shadow to one man. Adolf Hitler did not create the darkness in Germany. He gave millions of people permission to unleash the shadow they had been suppressing for decades. Possessed. Jung understood this with terrifying clarity. When individuals refuse to face their own shadow, it does not disappear. It accumulates, it grows, and eventually it finds a collective outlet. Wars, genocides, witch hunts, cancel culture. Every atrocity in human history began with individuals refusing to look at their own darkness. Think about that for a moment. Every mob that has ever formed, every scapegoat that has ever been blamed, every group that has been dehumanized, it all starts with the same mechanism: people projecting their unacknowledged shadow onto others. 1. The individual suppresses their darkness. 2. The darkness seeks an external target. 3. A group agrees on the same target. 4. Destruction follows. As Jung wrote, people will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. And in our modern age of social media, the collective shadow has found a new playground. But Jung did not just diagnose the problem, he found the cure, and it starts with something most people are terrified to do: Jung's descent. In 1913, Carl Jung did something that most psychiatrists would consider insane. He deliberately descended into his own unconscious. For 6 years, Jung induced visions, confronted terrifying inner figures, and recorded everything in what he called the Red Book, a manuscript so disturbing that his family kept it locked in a vault for decades after his death. Madness or genius? Jung met figures in his psyche that spoke to him, argued with him, threatened him. He encountered his own shadow face to face, and what he found was not what he expected. The shadow was not simply evil. It was not a monster to be destroyed. It was a messenger. The shadow holds everything you need to become whole. Jung realized that the parts of himself he had rejected, his aggression, his ambition, his sexuality, his capacity for cruelty, these were not flaws. They were raw power that he had been too afraid to claim. Inside the darkness, he found gold, and this discovery led him to the most important concept in all of depth psychology. But understanding it requires courage that few possess. Shadow gold. Here is what nobody tells you about the shadow. It does not just contain your darkness, it contains your greatest gifts. Jung called this the golden shadow. Think about it. Have you ever admired someone so intensely it almost hurt? A speaker who commands a room, an artist whose work moves you to tears, a leader whose confidence seems superhuman. That admiration, that longing, that is also projection. Where your fear is, there is your task. The qualities you worship in others are qualities that exist within you, but you have never given yourself permission to express them. Your greatest gift is hidden. Maybe you suppressed your creativity because someone told you art was not a real career. Maybe you buried your leadership because you were taught that ambition is selfish. Maybe you silenced your voice because speaking up once got you punished. The gold you seek is buried in the darkness you avoid. The golden shadow explains why so many talented people never reach their potential. They are not lacking ability. They are afraid of their own power. Afraid. But how do you actually retrieve this gold? How do you face the shadow without being consumed by it? That is exactly what Jung spent his entire life figuring out. Shadow work. Jung developed a process he called individuation, the deliberate integration of the shadow into your conscious personality, and it is not for the faint of heart. The first step is radical honesty. You must look at yourself without the filters, without the masks, without the carefully constructed image you show the world. 1. Notice what triggers you in others. 2. Ask what part of you it reflects. 3. Accept that trait without judgment. 4. Integrate it consciously into your life. When you feel rage towards someone, ask yourself what part of you they are mirroring. When you judge someone harshly, ask yourself what you are really judging in yourself. When you feel envy, ask yourself what buried desire is trying to surface. The things you hate out, there are the things you have denied in here. But integration does not mean acting on every dark impulse. It means acknowledging those impulses exist, owning them, understanding them. As Jung explained, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is the hardest work any human being can do. It requires you to love the parts of yourself you were taught to hate. But the reward is something most people never experience, and that brings us to the transformation itself. Becoming whole. When you integrate your shadow, something extraordinary happens. You stop being half a person. For the first time in your life, you have access to your full range of human experience. The aggression you buried becomes assertiveness. The selfishness you denied becomes healthy boundaries. The darkness you feared becomes depth and wisdom. Broken becomes whole. You stop projecting your unresolved issues onto the people around you. Your relationships transform because you are no longer looking for someone to complete you. You are already complete. Wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being. You develop what Jung called a personality with volume. Not a flat, one-dimensional persona, but a rich, complex, fully alive human being who can access both light and dark, strength and vulnerability, reason and emotion. The goal was never to become good, the goal was to become whole. And here is the paradox Jung discovered. The people who do this work, who face their shadow and integrate it, they do not become more dangerous, they become more compassionate, because once you have seen your own capacity for darkness, knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people. You can never judge another human being the same way again. Modern shadow. If Jung were alive today, he would look at our world and see the shadow everywhere. Social media has become the greatest shadow projection machine in human history. Every outraged comment is a confession you did not mean to make. Think about it, we curate perfect images of ourselves online while our shadow grows larger in the darkness. We cancel strangers for flaws we refuse to see in ourselves. We divide the world into heroes and villains because it is easier than admitting we are both. Perfect online, broken inside. The anxiety epidemic, the loneliness crisis, the endless search for meaning in likes and followers. Jung would say all of it traces back to the same root cause. We have collectively abandoned shadow work. We have become experts at showing our light and strangers to our own darkness. But there is hope in this diagnosis, because if the problem is that we have abandoned the shadow, then the solution is clear. We must go back, we must descend, we must do the work that Jung showed us is possible. And the urgency has never been greater, because there is one final truth about the shadow that changes everything. Shadow's gift. Jung's greatest insight was not that we have a shadow, it was that the shadow is the doorway to everything we have ever wanted. Every great artist who ever lived created from their shadow. Every transformative leader drew power from integrating their darkness. Every person who has ever truly changed did so by embracing the parts of themselves they were taught to reject. Liberation. The shadow is not your enemy. It never was. It is the part of you that has been waiting your entire life to be acknowledged, to be loved, to be brought home. I'd rather be whole than good. And when you finally turn toward it, when you stop running and start listening, you discover something that Jung spent his whole life trying to tell us. The shadow is not the obstacle to your best self, it is the path to your best self. You do not find yourself by only looking at the light. You find yourself by having the courage to enter the dark. Enter the dark. That is what Carl Jung discovered. That is why the shadow remains his most important work. And that is why this journey, the journey inward, is the most important journey you will ever take. Carl Jung gave us a map, not a map of the world, a map of ourselves. He showed us that the darkness we fear is not something outside of us. It is inside us. And it is not our enemy, it is our greatest untapped resource. Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes. Tonight before you sleep, try something. Think of one person who truly bothers you, one trait in someone else that makes you angry, and then ask yourself the hardest question anyone can ask. Where does that same trait live in me? That question is the beginning of shadow work. That question is the beginning of becoming whole. Look inside, awaken. If you made it this far, comment shadow integrated if this changed how you see yourself. The wisdom of the ages is yours. Use it well. If this unlocks something in you, hit like and subscribe. The vault has more. Comment below which part of your shadow you are ready to face.